Welcome back, Cross Connectors. I've just decided that's what you all are called.
Cross Connectors.
Yeah.
Cross Connectors.
Making the cross connections.
Yeah, all our connections to the cross. Welcome to Cross Connections, Season 2, Cover to Cover, as we read along with you each week and discuss the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Cover to Cover is hosted by
Rick Morley,
Elliot VanHoy,
and Natalee Hill. Join us as we discover how these stories connect us to God, to our inner selves, and to one another in a world that tries so hard to disconnect us. Hello, welcome back to Cross Connections. We are in the book of Daniel this week. Still in the Babylonian exile.
So they claim.
Well, the story is set in Babylon.
Correct.
Similarly to Ezekiel, Daniel is in Babylon. He's there.
Yep.
With 3 of his buddies. So, yeah.
Is there a song to go with this? See, I don't know, but I feel like there's a song that needs to go with his 3
Shadrach,
buddies.
Meshach, and Abednego?
Yeah, surely there's a song about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
There's got to be. Don't look at me.
What's
at least
amazing?
in VeggieTales or something like that. I'm sure they did
I wasn't a VeggieTales kid. So, Cross Connectors, if anyone out there is a VeggieTales kid, Allie, somebody, let us know where the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego song is so that we can share it with our folks.
With fellow cross connectors.
With your fellow Cross Connectors. Yes, we are calling out some of our avid listeners by name.
So we're in Babylon, and these are some of the highfalutin people of Jerusalem. And so they get to Babylon, and they are not like in slave quarters. They are with the other highfalutin, important people of Babylon. They're like in the palace. And we'll see the ways that Babylon tried to erode their identity through changing their diet, through changing their names. And Elliot sort of referenced this, that we might not be in Babylon, because the theory, and I absolutely subscribe to this 100%, is that the bulk of the book of Daniel was not written during the Babylonian captivity period.
Which is different than Ezekiel. Sense was that it was actually written during that period. It seemed like Ezekiel was writing letters in response to what was actively happening, etc.
So this appears to be about Babylon, but written at a much later time. It may be the last biblical work that was composed, the last book of the Bible written, Old Testament written. And it was composed at the next time that Jerusalem, Judea, was in super crisis. And I just love this history. And especially since we've been doing so much Babylonian captivity stuff, I think it's really nice that we get to step out of that and do another crisis,
But this is not the crisis, however, of the destruction of the Second Temple. Which we don't get until the New Testament. This is another crisis.
This is a second century BC crisis. So the Babylonians were conquered by the Persians, the Medes, one united kingdom. The Persians were then conquered by the Greeks, a guy named Alexander the Great. Might have heard of him. And he installed several of his brothers to rule over this large kingdom. He sent a group called the Ptolemies, spelled with a P and a T, Ptolemy, over to rule over Egypt. And then he sent a group called the Seleucids, which ruled over Syria, including Jerusalem. And around the year 180-ish, 180 BC, the king of the Seleucids is Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Antiochus was kind of his name. Epiphanes was kind of his nickname, his title that he gave himself. It means, of course, we all have, remember, we have a season of the church called Epiphany. Epiphanes, same Greek word. It means manifestation of God.
Yep.
So he basically gave himself the name manifestation of God, which I think, like, the epiphanies could also be then rendered narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah. Well,
Well, this is not a surprise, is it?
his enemies called him Epimanes, which means the madman.
Yeah. Well, he is a bit. He's a lot. He's
Right.
not a good dude. So he locks down Jerusalem, basically says that the Torah practices are out. You cannot worship according to the Torah. He desecrates the temple. He sets up a huge statue to Zeus in the temple, which we'll probably get to when we talk about the book of Daniel, and tries to turn the youth of Jerusalem more Greek instead of Jewish. He wants to basically culturally eliminate Judaism from the Jewish people. The story goes on, and I just say this because I think it's interesting. There's a guy who then rises up. His name is Judas Maccabeus. This is not the Judas that was with Jesus. This is almost 200 years before then. Maccabeus is also sort of a nickname. It means the hammer. And Judas the Hammer pulls together a group of, what would you call them? Insurrectionists, basically.
Yeah.
And against all odds, they end up beating the Seleucid Greek army and driving them out of Jerusalem. There is no way this should have happened. No way. It's in. And so what did the Jewish people say? It's a miracle. Well, they also go up to the Temple Mount. It's terrible. They've sacrificed pigs on the altar in the temple to
Which are
Zeus.
That's a
unclean.
huge
Right.
no-no.
Huge no-no in the Torah. They're an unclean animals. They have to tear the altar down. They rebuild an altar. That's a whole other thing as well. But then they go to light the candles, the lamps in the candelabra in the temple. And gosh, there's only enough oil to keep those lamps going for a day. But they light them anyway. And miracle, the lights end up being lit for 8 days. And this is celebrated in the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah.
Yep.
So back to Daniel.
I want
Wow.
to say one thing.
Go
If
ahead.
anyone is interested in reading about this, it is not in what is called our Old Testament canon. That is the books that Christians view as scripture, canonical scripture. But you can read about it in First Maccabees, which many Bibles will have in, if they have an apocrypha. First
Yep.
Maccabees will be in there.
Yep.
And that recounts the story of Antiochus Epiphanes, Judas Maccabeus, the Hasmoneans, who are the priestly family that initiates this revolt.
Interestingly, Jesus celebrates Hanukkah in the Gospel of John. He's in the temple for the festival of the dedication, which is Hanukkah. It's when the Maccabees rededicated the temple. Anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting piece of thing to make sure that people know, because I think most modern Christians have no idea that the festival of the dedication is Hanukkah.
Yes, right.
Because when you hear about it, and you don't hear it called Hanukkah
No.
anywhere. Keep that in mind,
Just the
folks.
dedication.
The dedication.
So the reason we think that the book of Daniel is written during this time was, and the reason they wrote about Babylon was not to just tell history about what happened a long time ago, but to talk about what was going on right then as they were dealing with the Greek Seleucids. And so we see in the book of Daniel, we see the Babylonians trying to squeeze the Jewishness out of the people, just like the Greek Seleucids were trying to squeeze the Jewishness out of the people hundreds of years later. And so the book is like a sermon about something that happened a long time ago to speak to what's happening in their day.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's really
I love
thorough
that.
background. It's so interesting. I was thinking about it. I was hearing these things coming up. I'm like, there is something else going on here.
Yes.
There's a whole other,
Yeah.
all the predictions of what was going to happen. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
this is really interesting. Where is this going?
Yep.
Who are they talking about?
So a few follow-ups I would add literarily and historically.
Yeah.
Daniel is 12 chapters. The first 6 chapters are viewed as maybe having been written a little bit earlier.
Yep.
They tend to have a more positive view of the Babylonians. Daniel and his fellows' interactions with Nebuchadnezzar are a little bit more positive. We make a shift in the book around chapter 7, and this is where we get the first what's called apocalyptic vision If you go back to our episode on Ezekiel, we introduced this category of apocalyptic literature. One of the defining characteristics of it is it views earthly events and heavenly events as being interrelated. So part of what we see here is Daniel receives visions and dreams and encounters with angelic beings. That's really definitive of apocalyptic literature. But the purpose of these visions and dreams, as Rick already mentioned, is to help people understand the crisis that's unfolding in their day. And that's also a shift between the first 6 chapters and then chapters 7 through 12, is that the first 6 chapters are much more narrative. It's kind of about what is happening to Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, under Babylonian occupation. The next chapters we think are written a little bit later, because this is where you get these really detailed visions from these angelic visitors to Daniel in Daniel's visions and dreams. And they're really outlining much more geopolitical events that are quote unquote going to happen.
Right.
Part of what Rick is saying is that these events are unfolding as Daniel's being written and then received. And so part of what these visions of these beasts and these statues that are divided into 4 different sections is trying to do is to help the people understand this is what's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
This is how we can understand it. This is the way that God is involved. And that's really the key of these visions in the latter half of Daniel, is to say that God is the ultimate agent of history.
Yeah. And that God was involved when we were in big trouble in Babylon.
Yep.
And so now that we're in big trouble with Antiochus Epiphanes IV, God is still in charge. That's why it's a sermon using previous material to speak to today.
Wow. The first 6 chapters are kind of fun.
They are.
In some way.
It's
The BBS stories.
It's exactly
Yes.
right. It reminds me of the beginning of Genesis, where you get we're back into Sunday school.
Yeah.
And the lion's den
And
the
in fact,
fiery furnace. Yeah.
our Sunday school, which we call
Oh, yeah.
Children's Formation on Sunday morning, is in the book of Daniel.
Right now.
Right now.
They have
Here.
huge lions. They have 4 huge.
It's great.
I was in the family service this week, and so I was selling the kids on what was going on in children's formation, selling the parents to come to adult formation. And I said they're doing Daniel in children's formation, and there's 4 big lions downstairs. And one kid's eyes went like saucers, like, what? And I was like, okay, they're large pictures of lions. They don't actually have lions downstairs. But
Right. That would be akin to something,
next year.
that you would find, at Sight and Sound out in Lancaster. Or something.
They don't even use real lions. They use animatronic lions.
It's a
because
little bit
lions are a little,
unsafe.
yeah.
Yeah. We need to let the wild animals be wild.
The insurance rider that
elsewhere.
we would need to bring lions on campus.
Forget it. Joy would shut it down.
She would.
Joy is our chief operating officer, for those of you listening who don't know. Yeah, they are in the book of Daniel. They're going to be in Daniel for about 8 weeks. So I think by the time you're listening to this, they'll be on week 2 or 3 at this point. So if you've got young ones, I believe this is our 2nd through 5th graders who are reading Daniel, bring them to Sunday morning Christian formation.
Yep. After the service.
Great fun stuff for you down there. Maria's got games and lions and everything.
And
Pictures
bears.
of lions. Well, there's no bears in this. The bears in the
I
Old
know. I was
Testament.
just trying
Well, there is a bear in Daniel, though it is just representative of the, I want to say, Persian Empire.
I think you're,
Oh,
yeah.
that's right. There's
in-
something in wild beasts.
Yeah,
That's
in
right.
his later visions, there's a vision of a lion, a bear. I'm forgetting the
There's
third.
there's no tiger there.
No tiger, no tiger.
Well, they're not just a lion
No.
and just a bear. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind
Symbolic.
Of, they're
Yeah,
symbolic,
symbolic.
and they've got wings. And anyway, so one of the things I thought was interesting right at the beginning of the story, if we want to get kind of to the beginning of the story, is you said that they were taking these people in and trying to remove the Jewishness from them. What I thought is that really interesting was Nebuchadnezzar was looking for very specific kinds of people to bring in. The smart and attractive and with particular knowledge and insight that he wanted to bring in. So almost like he was trying to pick the cream of the crop of the people.
In verse 4 of the first chapter, it's young men in whom there was no defect, good in appearance, insightful in terms of all smartness, knowledgeable, discerning in knowledge, and in whom there was capacity to stand in attendance in the king's palace.
Yeah. And of the
It's like
elites and of the royal.
It's like the staff at St. David's. Like, it's just like right there.
I've gotten that in email reviews a couple times. No, but that's I think important to recognize. And this is maybe a little bit more of the positive view here at the start of Daniel, that in the ancient Near East and at the time of Alexander the Great, what we call in history the Hellenistic period, assimilation was very much a thing, but it was gentle in a lot of ways. It was, you can have your culture, you can have your practices. And so part of what happens here is Nebuchadnezzar takes these Judeans and he gets the cream of the crop and he's going to use them in his palace. Like, this isn't a picture of a ruler that's like, I'm taking these people and I'm throwing them in jail, or they're going to become my slaves, or what you might expect from this idea of like, oh, that's an evil king. But just a way of naming part of what this would have mirrored some of the early assimilation practices of Alexander the Great. Because remember, a little history rebuff for people that are listening, he conquered like most of the world.
Oh, yeah.
The world of the time of the Mediterranean, like truly extremely expansive empire.
Yeah, and he married or had a relationship with Cleopatra there in Egypt. Shakespeare even wrote about it.
Yep.
Sorry, kind of a big deal.
True.
For later on.
Alexander's a big deal.
Alexander's a big deal. This is where we get Alexandria. There's so many things named after Alexander. So it's interesting that the assimilation is intended to be gentle. They're going to be taught. They're going to be really well fed and taken care of.
Right.
Yes, and part of their being well fed is that you can't eat in your kosher diet. We don't think that's healthy. And so we want you to eat all the things that come off the king's table. And so the Daniel and the friends say, no, we're not going to do that. And that's where they get in trouble the first time. They end up they eat vegetables instead. So they're not eating their diet from back in Jerusalem, but they're still technically keeping kosher by just eating vegetables.
By refusing the meat, because the meat would probably be either meats that were not prepared the right way or meats that would not have been eaten by them at all. So if you just avoid that, then you can keep.
So we teach them a new language. We give them a new diet. In verse 6, we find that we always know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because that's their Babylonian names, but that's not their given names.
No, and it's kind of sad that we don't remember their real
Hananiah,
names.
Mishael, and Azariah are their Hebrew names. Daniel gets Belteshazzar. It's interesting. The three friends just end up always going by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for sort of like the rest of the book.
Yeah.
But Daniel does not go by Belteshazzar except when he's talking with the king. Like he somehow in the story keeps his Jewishness. But you can see like they're just trying to like, and it's not, you're right, it's not terrible. They're not thrown in prison. They're not shackled up. But it's just they're who they were when they left Jerusalem is slowly being eroded away.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh gosh, this feels like things I've heard about at other points in history.
Yeah.
Right? Where, no, we're doing you a favor.
Right, we're going to change your name.
This is, you're just going to change your name. It'll be easier for everybody here to understand.
Your name's really hard to pronounce. There's too many consonants in that name. We're going to give you a new one.
We're going to give you a new name.
Right.
It'll be easier for you to for everybody here.
Right,
can
here,
spell that.
We're going to teach you the language. We're going to give you a new name.
Right.
People around here will be able to
Don't talk that language
pronounce
that
it.
you used to speak.
No one's
Nobody
gonna
here
understand
understands
it.
that. You
Right.
need to speak this language. And gosh, how many people have lost.
And you're going to eat really well off the king's table. Like we got lots of pork and
Such
bacon,
an honor.
scallops. Like you can shrimp, lobster. We're just going to pull it off.
It's
the best.
It's a huge honor. It's delicious food.
Right. But it's
I mean, it's not what
you would eat,
would have eaten,
which is probably terrible. I mean, who wants that food?
Yeah. Just for a moment here, I heard this bit about the food. I've heard rumor of this thing referred to as the Daniel Plan diet.
Oh,
this tiny little bit of the first chapter of Daniel where that whole thing comes from?
Yes, absolutely. We did that at my old church.
Yeah,
at St. Mark's.
Really?
Oh yeah, maybe 1 year. Yeah, we had a dietitian as a parishioner who was amazing. I think she's a podcast listener, actually.
Wow.
She's super amazing. But yeah.
It's just surprising to me because it's such a tiny piece of this very small bit of the Hebrew scriptures. To have come up with an entire diet plan off of it seems kind of incredible to me. And I will say I'm a little skeptical of the whole thing.
The whole idea is like you take the foods that are too full of fat, and you remove them and you eat more vegetables. I mean, it's the basic.
Isn't that just being a vegetarian? But not.
Yeah.
Okay. No, very interesting point of cultural note that Daniel Plan diet comes from that a little bit.
It looks like this is totally fresh news to Elliot.
No, I've heard about it.
Oh, okay.
I just don't really know the first thing about it. I know you eat whole foods. I know this like the whole foods diet and the Daniel diet kind of have a lot of overlap. I'm trying to remember. I'm like thinking, how long does the Daniel diet last on the like official Daniel diet plan?
I forget.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was a while ago.
It's not forever.
No, because I mean, even here, there's a time, right? So I know here it talks about the test was for 10 days and then they eat this for only 10 days. Because remember, the guard comes to them and says, hey, my head's on you guys. If
you're looking sickly
Exactly.
and weak,
Right.
then I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah,
And
my
so-
head's a goner. And he's like, I'm not doing that for you guys. And so what they say, Daniel and his friends, is give us 10 days, we'll eat this. And if we look any worse, we will actually change. We will eat the food you want us to eat. And what happens is he comes back after 10 days and Daniel, the book of Daniel reports, they actually look better, fatter,
Right.
and like more healthy and robust than all the other people in the court. So I was curious if it literally says do this for 10 days. I always thought the Daniel diet lasted 30 days, but I might be mixing that up with there's another
It's
diet.
weeks.
The Whole 30, that's what I'm thinking of.
Whole
Oh, yeah.
I know Whole 30 and Daniel diet have a lot of overlap, similar stuff going on there.
This is turning into a diet podcast.
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing?
I wanted to bring it up. Some people may have heard about the Daniel Plan diet. We're in the book of Daniel. Kind of feel like we're the kind of podcast that can't avoid at least making note of it.
Yep.
Because,
Absolutely.
we come up with all kinds of things out of what our scripture says. So the intent here, though, of writing this is to showcase the way in which the Babylonians were in a sort of gentle way forcing assimilation on the Jewish people in Babylon. And the
we
ways in
see it.
which God supported Daniel and his friends, who I'm going to name with their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, supporting them in maintaining their Jewishness despite this attempt to enculturate them to the Babylonian.
Yeah. So yes, I think the purpose of this book, especially the first 6 chapters, is to give these stories, which we'll get into, the lion's den and the furnace and the stories of Daniel interpreting the dreams and the food, to show the ways that supposedly Israelites under Babylonian captivity navigated foreign occupation.
Yep.
And part of what it's trying to do is to say, there are ways you can navigate this. It's actually not a zero-sum game.
Right.
It's not a black and white picture. So the first 6 chapters very much are not presenting a kind of Maccabean picture of, well, under foreign occupation, you need to revolt and to take up armed resistance. In fact, I actually think this is why, to some degree, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are named with their Babylonian names for the entirety of the book. I actually think it's part of a way of the first 6 chapters of Daniel saying it's okay to go by your Babylonian name, much like in the Hellenistic period, many Jews would have also had a Greek name.
Yeah.
And I could be totally off base here, but I think it is the book of Daniel's way of saying it's okay to have a Greek name. It's okay to go by your Greek name under Greek occupation.
So it's more of like, you think it's more of like a normalizing. Like
I
it
do.
happened back then, so it's happening now.
I think,
So
again, it's not a black and white. It's not a full acceptance. It's not a full assimilation. It's a way of saying you can navigate this in a way that's livable. And part of what it's saying is, as you navigate it in a way that's livable, there will be small things, supposedly small things like a name, and there will be bigger things for the book of Daniel, like a diet or like worshiping. What is it when Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den? He's told to worship
the king.
The king, yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the areas where, okay, maybe you can take the name Shadrach,
but you're not going there.
but you can't go there.
Yeah.
And when they try to make you go there, you can resist and God will be with you.
God will be with you.
And what's interesting is that the resistance there is not violent resistance. It's not armed resistance.
Right.
It's worship, ritual resistance, where then God protects you in the midst of persecution. So again, kind of provides a contrast with something like Maccabees, which comes a little bit later. But I think it is trying to present a picture of how you can live within this culture in a way that's somewhat pragmatic.
Yeah. There's realities.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at one point, it's very much like the story of Joseph in Egypt, right?
I was
Like,
going to say,
yeah.
I wanted to get to just
very
the
similar in the
relationship.
interpretation of dreams, but also in the way, speaking of livability and like pragmatism, the book of Daniel reports that Daniel takes like an official role in the empire, right?
Yeah,
Like
just same way as Joseph.
Yeah, this is not someone where the book is saying you need to be rebelling, you need to be overthrowing the empire, you need to assassinate the king. Like, no, like he participates in this culture. He becomes a member of it while finding a way to retain his Jewish identity. So it's really struggling with this question of retention of identity and assimilation. And it's trying to find a way that these can work together rather than only butt heads, I think.
You know, I was just thinking of somebody else who was retaining their Jewishness in another culture, and that would be Esther's uncle.
Mordecai?
Mordecai, thank you.
Also in the
Esther.
Persian period.
Also during the Persian colonial.
So this is,
Yeah.
this is obviously a big thing on people's minds back then.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how are we going to be true to who we are when the society and culture around us isn't, right? And so there are some things you give on, and then there are some things that you don't.
I would love to hear from someone who's maybe a first generation native to a new country, like their family moved or something.
Right.
There must be pieces of this that are relatable for them.
Think about so many of the stories of Ellis Island and those waves of immigration where so many people, even today, their last names are changed as they immigrated because it was like, quote unquote, too hard to spell, too hard to pronounce. A lot of like family names were changed or anglicized. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely stories from our own culture of the way this has happened in our history.
Yeah. And continues to happen.
Yeah.
Here and in other countries where, people move, they bring some parts of them with them, and then they take on some things in the new place that they go.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting story in the richness of how it can continue to enlighten in what's going on in our lives for us.
Definitely. I think another important aspect to Daniel and thinking about the way Daniel interacts in his culture is to some degree the perspective of the New Testament writers as well, is that Christians are foreigners. And they kind of transcendentalize / universalize this concept insofar as, like I think it's 1 Peter has this idea of Christians are foreigners and exiles within the world, that Christians belong to the kingdom of God. And it's actually dealing with this same tension where in saying that, it's not saying be completely removed from the world, don't interact with the world, don't be involved with culture or politics.
Right.
It's actually saying, yes, interact with the world, be involved with the world, but do it in a way that you retain your status as someone that belongs, quote unquote, to the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. And that gives you a certain distinctiveness that shapes your ethical being in the world. So I think there's a lot of overlap with Daniel and the writers of the New Testament as well, in terms of how they're thinking about how do Christians interact in the Roman Empire and the world that they find themselves within.
Yeah, they don't have to just be in a ghetto. They don't just have to be in one place and we're just going to do our own thing. But you can interact with the culture and the people around you.
Exactly. So in some ways,
render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And render unto God what is God's.
Right. Yeah. So in some ways, it's the book of Daniel and some of the writings in the New Testament, I think, can adequately be called very anti-culture war type documents, right? Like what I mean by that is a lot of culture war, quote unquote, type thinking proceeds in an us and them manner, and very much like we need to be against everything of the culture. I'm thinking of, and you might have some experience with this too, Rick and Natalie, of growing up and people having this mindset of burn all your secular, quote unquote, CDs, right? Don't listen to rock music, right?
Oh.
I never had that.
You never?
I grew up Methodist. We were
I
like
know. I was
very
saying,
middle of the road.
I grew up UCC. I heard about it from other
Yeah.
areas, but I didn't. That
Never
was
even
not,
experienced it in your context, knew people that thought that way? Or...
So I had friends come over and stay at our house one time. I don't remember if our kids were born yet. Maybe not. And we had our Harry Potter books. This is
Yes, I was going to bring this up.
And
yeah.
they were sitting on the shelf in the room that they were going to sleep in. This is my best friend from high school, my best friend. And the next, like when they left the next morning, went into the room to undo the bed and whatnot. And those books had been turned around.
Those like spine in.
Yeah, 'cause like we don't even want to look at that.
Whoa. And
but
see,
the words are closer to that direction. They can get out more easily.
you could corrupt people.
Right.
No, I definitely knew people who they only listened to Christian music, which, some of it's enjoyable.
But
it has its place, but it was like the only thing.
Yeah. I think Daniel 1-6 is kind of pushing back against that kind of mentality of like, I can only listen to Christian music, only watch Christian movies. You use the word ghetto, Rick. It's very much this idea of like, we need to have only a Christian culture.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really the message of Daniel. I think
Right.
Daniel provides us a framework for thinking through a both and rather than an either or.
Hey.
And so does the New Testament, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
Look, if I can find biblical comparisons to draw with K-pop demon hunters,
Yeah.
I think we can have some balance here.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I actually love doing series like that where you take something that's pop culture and be like, where are you seeing
Right.
what you've been told? Like, where are you bringing your faith experience and your
Definitely.
culture and seeing
The gospel according to Star Wars. The
That's
gospel
right.
Oh, my
according to
goodness.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And like some authors intentionally write that in.
Absolutely.
Tolkien is known for that.
Right.
But not everybody does.
Right.
And not everybody has, but that doesn't mean you can't still find
Nope.
Yeah.
some of those themes in there. We're
Definitely.
so steeped in it ourselves
Yep.
that
So one of the things that I always think about with this conversation, and we don't have to go down the whole rabbit trail of it, but one of the early Christian bishops, Augustine, famously said, all truth is God's truth. And I think that for me is always a model for these kinds of conversations. Like if something is true, good, and beautiful, whether it's in Harry Potter or whatever, then God is at work within it. And I think that helps us. And I think that's kind of the message of Daniel, right? Like Daniel, part of the message here is that like God is at work in these visions and these interactions with Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, right? Like it's not this us against them kind of mentality.
There are no competing truths.
No.
Yeah.
What is true?
And in fact, in Daniel, part of what happens is through that interaction, through that shared connection, Nebuchadnezzar, in some meaningful way, recognizes Daniel's God.
A couple times.
A couple times.
I mean,
Turn
there's no
fully.
conversion. There's no.
Right.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
He doesn't come down to the altar call and give his life to Yahweh. But,
Right.
But there's a couple moments where he's, your God is doing stuff.
Your God's
Exactly.
your God's one of the gods
Right.
and is powerful. So we see that the first time we see this in Daniel 2, where Nebuchadnezzar has visions and his regular interpreters can't even tell him what his vision was and then to interpret it. And so Nebuchadnezzar's miffed at everyone. He's going to just slaughter the whole lot of them, even the ones who didn't come and attempt to. And Daniel, sticks his neck out there and says, "Now wait a minute, let me try.
Yep.
You didn't let me try." And he and his friends get together and they pray for guidance and vision. And Daniel goes to Nebuchadnezzar and is able then to, much like Joseph back
Much
in
like
Egypt,
it's like right out of the pages of the Genesis.
right out of Genesis, can interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream, knows what it was, can tell him all about it and what it means.
Right.
And then therefore saves his and his friends' lives. And that's the moment when they're all given these high positions. Now,
Yeah.
Daniel's the dream interpreter of them. The other three don't necessarily interpret dreams. They've got other
Right.
work that they do. But so now here they are, these 4 Jewish men who are lifted to very high positions because of that.
Also, a really fascinating point. Daniel makes it really explicit. The book of Daniel makes it really explicit that the person Daniel actively goes out of his way to save the lives of these Babylonian kind of, really they're wizards, diviners, And what's fascinating is at many points in our Old Testament scriptures, we get the command that diviners, wizards, witches should be put to death.
Right.
So again, a very interesting note on Daniel's relationship to the culture he finds himself in.
Right.
Just worth mentioning.
And what's not entirely clear is how much time he's spent with these people. You know, he's being raised up into this. He's being educated in this culture. He could be spending significant time with these people and getting to know them on an interpersonal level and not want to see them die.
So part of what's interesting about these stories that's also maybe worth mentioning, and this is a shift from the prophetic literature we just found ourselves in, is that we mentioned this in our Ezekiel episode. In the prophetic literature, the prophets are always receiving a word from the Lord.
Yep.
In Daniel is receiving visions and words from angels. And even in these stories, right? So like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which happens in Daniel 3, they're thrown into this furnace.
Now, why? This was because they were asked to worship the golden statue, right?
Yeah, Daniel 3 begins with Nebuchadnezzar building this ginormous golden statue of himself. The beginning of chapter 3 explains it was 60 cubits and its width was 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon.
So just to go back to what we were just saying a few minutes ago, in the prior chapter, end of chapter 2, verse 47, the king answered Daniel, your God is God of gods, Lord of kings, and revealer of mysteries. Like, your God's real. And
after Daniel has interpreted his dream.
Right. So we have this moment where you're like, oh, like he's seen the light.
He's in.
He's, you know, he's turned, he's not burning, right? And then in the next chapter, he sets up a massive statue of himself and says, everybody bow down and worship to me.
Right.
So
Right, yeah.
it's, you know, he's not presented as 100% bad dude.
Right.
But there are some troubling issues.
And
Definitely not on Yahweh's side.
part of what's going on here, we've talked about this many times before, is that in the ancient Near East, there's very much a kind of cultural assimilation. And in the Hellenistic period as well, that has no problem coming into a new territory or culture and religion and saying, oh yeah, you guys can have your gods.
Totally.
So actually, when Alexander the Great's taking over or Babylon's taking over, they don't come into a new region and say, you have to worship our gods. They're like, you can worship your gods, but also do some stuff for our gods. It's very much a both and. Part of the challenge for the Jewish people in the ancient Near East is this claim on Yahweh's behalf to be a jealous God, to be an exclusive God, to say you can't worship the other gods. And so what I think modern readers often have a really hard time with something like the end of Daniel 2, where Nebuchadnezzar's, your God's awesome. Because we read it and we think, oh, if he's saying that, he must have recognized this.
God is the one and true only God.
Exactly. And that's just not the way it worked back then.
Very
He's like,
polytheistic.
your God's a God too. Excellent. Now bow down and worship me because I'm a God as well.
Like just like the Greeks, they had a whole pantheon and then some which then, the Romans took in as well.
Which made assimilation a lot easier in other cultures.
Exactly.
And there were also like, we have our fertility God. Oh, you have your fertility God. They're like the same God. Oh, you have your lightning God. We have a lightning god. We call him Zeus. So like the same thing. But with the Jewish people, they don't have that. And they have this unique claim.
Isn't that kind of a little bit what happens when Christianity went into Latin America, South America? And that's where you get like the huge Mary worship because there wasn't a feminine deity in the obvious in the Christianity that was being brought there at the time.
That's a big factor.
Yeah.
Part of the way that we're really down the rabbit hole now, but part of the way Christianity actually does this in its own novel way is what Paul does on the hill, Mars Hill. When he says,
the Areopagus.
Yeah, the Areopagus. What you worship is unknown, I proclaim to you as known. And so he has this way of being like, oh, well, you think you're worshiping these gods, but really the true God, the God you really are meaning to worship is the God of Israel, the God of Jesus Christ. So interesting way the New Testament kind of actually still takes this and spins it a little bit.
Yeah.
But so that takes us,
Daniel.
Yeah, but anyway,
we're in
back
Daniel
to Daniel.
3. Right.
We're in Daniel.
We're in Daniel, and in Daniel 3, there's a giant statue of Nebuchadnezzar.
That's right. Giant statue.
And he wants to be worshipped.
And the boys, Daniel and the boys, won't bow down.
No, they won't.
And so here's the line in the sand.
What's interesting is that Daniel's not actually in this bit. It's really only about the three.
The boys.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting. At any rate, yep.
Yeah, they won't. This is where they draw the line in the sand. Okay, you can change your voice, change your names, and we'll we'll try our diet, but if our diet doesn't work, we'll try yours.
Yep.
But here, there's no. And so think about this in the year 180 when you have the Greek Seleucids reigning over you and they're setting up statues to Zeus in the temple and bidding to worship him. Like, okay, there are some things about this culture and this occupation that you're just going to have to live with and that are fine. And there are some lines in the sand that we as a people are just not going to cross.
Right.
And that big statue in the temple or this big statue here in the book of Daniel is one of those.
Right. And what happens, the response is, we're not going to do this. So they even say to Nebuchadnezzar, go ahead and throw us in the furnace. This is verse 17 of chapter 3. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. And I love the way it's almost like the diet thing again, the next verse. But if not, if this can't happen, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up. So no matter what,
Yeah, they're like, no.
we ain't worshiping.
Yeah, they
Furnace
are,
or not.
Yeah.
That's right.
they are going to stake their lives on this.
Right.
Yeah.
And we know what happens. They go into the furnace, and the story reports almost comically, the furnace is so hot that the people carrying them to the furnace
Can't make it.
They
Right.
die.
They die. Right.
And then there is a fourth figure in the furnace,
Like a divine being.
like a divine being. And this brings us full circle to how this all came up. As I was saying, the prophets, it's all about the word of the Lord. It's about the interaction with God. In Daniel, you don't actually get a lot of direct references to God or God's action. God's action is very much mediated by these divine angelic beings. Again, this is very characteristic of apocalyptic literature versus prophetic literature. God is very transcendent. His action on earth is mediated through these divine intermediaries.
And right here, this is a text of hope, not just for Daniel's buddies, but during the Greek occupation of Jerusalem. But the message is God has not left you.
Right.
God is the fourth figure who is right with you through all of your trials and through everything terrible going on with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it implies that this is an angel who is with them in there, a representative. As we said, that Daniel's working with, there's a lot of angels
You
representing
think it's a
God.
biblically accurate angel? Or do you think
This is here's what I think is very interesting is in Daniel, the angel-like figures are humanoid,
Yes.
which is a change from the
Ezekiel.
sorts of angels that we've heard referred to
Ezekiel and
previously.
Isaiah were-
Ezekiel and Isaiah's angels
wings
were,
everywhere, eyes everywhere, turning wheels, right?
yeah, they're something else entirely. There's no specific mention of wings on these humanoid angelic figures in Daniel. So I think maybe some piecing together of Isaiah and Ezekiel's really weird angels with Daniel's humanoid ones might be where we get to today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I mean, you could do a whole podcast on the history of divine angelic beings. In some sense, Daniel is returning, you could say, to the tradition of Genesis, where in Genesis, oh gosh, I'm trying to pull this off the top of my head. Genesis 6, maybe, there's the sons of God.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. They
And
were
the-
interacting with the people before the
What
flood.
a callback.
Yes.
Yes,
Big
I'm remembering
callback.
this.
And then later in Genesis, when there are these angelic beings, take, for example, Genesis 17, 16, 17, 15 area that come to Abraham and Sarah, they are always just people, right?
That's
so it's
right. Three
the
men.
three men come to Abraham before the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so there is this tradition of these people that are like semi-divine. They are speaking on behalf of God. People are terrified when they encounter them. Yeah, and we see that return in Daniel, but very different than the tradition in, like we said, Isaiah, Ezekiel, elsewhere, where they are these like fantastical
Frightful.
creatures.
Yeah, those ones are the be afraid ones, aren't they?
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure that. Yeah, like when they show up in the era before Noah, that's like a whole other interacting as if it's a very different sort of situation. And then when the men arrive, I don't think they say anything about not being afraid to Abraham and Sarah. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I think we get the fear when we get the multi-winged, multi-eyed.
Yeah. You definitely
Which is
do there.
certainly
Yes.
understandable.
You
And then
definitely
obviously in the
do.
New Testament, when they show up, there's a do not be afraid, which leads us to wondering which versions of this we're seeing.
Yep.
Interestingly, we're going to jump way ahead in Daniel if I say this.
Uh-oh.
I was going to say that it's interesting that one of these divine beings who shows up in Daniel has the name Gabriel.
Yes.
And this is a name we hear of
In the New
New
Testament.
Testament.
Right.
Gabriel being the one who comes and visits Mary. So,
And John the Baptist's father.
yes. It's
Zechariah.
Gabriel that goes to Zechariah.
Yeah.
Though I don't believe that the angel that visits Joseph is not given a name.
Is Michael in the New Testament?
Is it Michael's in Revelation?
Revelation only, right?
I think he's referenced in one of the Gospels, I think.
Because,
But he's
yes,
not-
the
but he's
other
not like
being here in Daniel is Michael.
Yeah. Yeah.
Saint Michael and all
The
angels.
archangel, yeah.
The archangel. Yeah, the couple archangels.
That's
Anyway,
that's
that's
another
jumping
thing
ahead.
also with apocalyptic literature, particularly when you get to apocalyptic literature that's not in the Bible, the extra biblical stuff. There's angels everywhere, and there's ranks of angels, and there's ranks upon ranks, and they're all have hierarchies, and it's kind of wild.
And
Daniel
that's
is
extra biblical,
not in the
not
Bible
biblical.
stuff. When you get to like the books of Enoch, things like
Yes.
that, I mean, it's wild angelology. We also find it
I
in,
like that
I
word.
know,
Angelology.
angelology. And we actually find it in Christian extra biblical books too. The more Gnostic you get, the crazier angels you get. Daniel's version of angels for an apocalyptic book is actually kind of tame.
Yeah, very tame.
And then you get, we love to take angels and come up with fun things to do with them in more modern things like, the TV show Touched by an Angel.
Yeah.
So, well, this also goes to some degree, it's funny to see the lineage to the idea that angels are protectors of people.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's really for the first time here in Daniel, Michael is called one of the chief princes in Daniel 10:13. And in Daniel 12:1, he's referred to as the kind of warrior protector of Israel. Basically, Daniel has this idea that the angels are doing cosmic battle
Yes.
with other forces on the cosmic plane. And that is what has an effect on the kind of geopolitical circumstances around Israel.
Right.
And it's kind of wild to think about. You start there, and then you get the Christmas movie. Oh, man, what is the Christmas movie? The famous Christmas movie where the angel keeps him from jumping off the bridge.
Oh, It's a Wonderful Life.
It's
Yeah.
a Wonderful Life. Really all goes back to Daniel, because this is really when you get this idea of angels as protectors of human people that are kind of influencing human events.
Yeah.
Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
It is the Jewish/Christian version of other ancient Near Eastern religions who said that the human plane definitely was influenced by the cosmic plane. It was just
Right.
not angels, it's other gods.
Exactly.
Other ancient texts from other cultures, other religions will talk about the gods going to battle and humans going to battle. And the reason you won your battle is because your god won against their god.
Yeah.
And what we see here is we can't be talking about other gods because we don't have other gods. And so here we see angels. We have these other divine beings.
You're making me nerd out so much. I'm like bouncing in my seat right now, Rick.
It's like, we got to Daniel 3, folks.
because we've talked about this on the podcast. To modify what you said a little bit, it's not even just other cultures and religions in the ancient Near East. Earlier texts in the Bible, right?
Yes.
Have this notion.
yeah.
And in Deuteronomy and Job, and we talked about the divine council, right?
Yep.
There is
that's
this
right.
there's this struggle with this idea earlier in the Old Testament that what scholars will talk about is maybe Israelite religion in its earliest form was henotheistic. Like
Yeah.
it was able to recognize these other gods existed, but Yahweh was the true God, was the ultimate God.
You said a word that I need.
Henotheistic.
Yes.
Heno, then just theistic, like monotheistic, Mono.
Right. But that's not polytheistic. So what's the difference?
Yeah, somewhat different than polytheistic, henotheistic. I don't know. Would you have a quick definition off your head, Rick? If not, I would want to Google this really quickly.
Yeah, it's a more refined view of polytheism. It just says our God is the real one, but there are other things out there.
Right. So it's different from a true monotheism in saying
There's only one,
only
period.
one God that metaphysically exists.
Right.
It's also different from polytheism insofar as more often polytheism just has a view of like all of these gods exist. They have different roles, responsibilities. It's kind of the view that, like Rick said, our God is the true God, and there are these lesser gods,
Divine beings.
It very much has a hierarchy in a way that a lot of polytheism doesn't. Of course, polytheism did often recognize there was kind of a chief of the pantheon. In some ways, you can
your Zeus's and your Odin.
Exactly. It's really like that, but amped up.
Yes.
Times 100. But what I'm naming is there is a pretty, I would call it kind of a scholarly consensus that the earliest forms of Israelite religion, and we see this in our scriptures, were more henotheistic. And as time goes on, as Israelite religion develops, there is much more of a concrete move into monotheism, into the view that the idols aren't actually connected to anything real. We've seen this in a lot of prophetic literature.
They have
dumb.
eyes, but they can't see, and ears, but they can't hear.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a tension there. All of that was a way of saying, to bring us back home, that to Rick's point, there was this view of gods over the nations. And we even see that at some points in our earlier scriptures. And when we get to this period in the 2nd century BCE, where monotheism in Judaism is much more solidified, they have to come up with a new way of talking about this, which is angels over different nations and regions. And we see that in Revelation as well. In the New Testament, there's this idea of the angel of Sardis, the angel of, you name it.
Laodicea.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a long angelic.
So we're on chapter 3.
Intro.
Yeah, that was a long angelic
This is
thing.
going to be an
because
8-hour podcast.
We were talking an 8-hour podcast and a 12-chapter book. It was referring to the being that appears in the furnace with our buddies Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Right.
Because
Thank you for bringing us back.
Those beings, beings like that show up later. We have the angel Gabriel and Michael show up a little later, and they're kind of similarly positioned. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out just fine from the furnace. All is well with them. We move into it. It's sort of narrative, but now it's Nebuchadnezzar kind of telling the story about a vision that he has and asking for Daniel's interpretation of it.
There's the hand writing on the wall.
Yeah. And then we have
Daniel 6, the lion's den.
I was going to say, we move into where we get Daniel 6, the lion's den. This is your classic Daniel story. If you know nothing about Daniel, if
you know this story,
forgotten about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because those are harder to say than Daniel, you've heard this one about Daniel being asked to worship in a particular way.
Yep.
Nebuchadnezzar's advisors pointing out, hey, he's not doing what you asked.
Yep.
Nebuchadnezzar's really broken up about this because, of course, as we said, one of the things that happened was that Daniel really built relationships in this place. And Nebuchadnezzar loved the fact that Daniel could actually interpret his dreams. He didn't really, didn't want to put him in the den.
It's very like Pilate and Jesus, right?
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to let you have Barabbas. And
we have a shift in chapter 6 from Nebuchadnezzar to Darius.
Yep.
Darius the Great, or Darius the First.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't Nebuchadnezzar, it's Darius.
Right.
Sorry.
Darius. Interesting.
Not a real person.
Actually real person. Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
I think this is the first time the two of you are like staunchly disagreeing.
So
on
there
something.
are inscriptions about Darius all over the place. In fact, inscriptions in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You can go and you can find, there's a huge Darius thing that was on loan to the Philadelphia Museum of Art for a while.
So the problem is
maybe a different Darius.
Is a different Darius. You are thinking of the Darius. Is that Darius in Esther? No. The problem here is that this Darius is called in 531 Darius the Mede, received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. The problem with this Darius in Daniel
is he comes before Cyrus.
And
he shouldn't have.
He's not a real person in the book of Daniel.
In this chronology.
And what he does here.
So I think it is Darius. I just think the chronology is wrong. I think the way the book of Daniel is edited, they ended up putting the Cyrus stuff after Darius, and they should have done it the other way around.
Yes. Yeah. This is almost unquestionably a confused reference to Darius I of Persia, who is who you were talking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely a real person. Lots of historical facts about this person, inscriptions.
I'm just
So
for those of you who
funny. So
cannot
we're
see us
agreeing.
right now, I am sitting
There's
back.
like tension in
and
the room.
there is tension. I'm sitting back and just watching them hash this out because I know nothing. This is fascinating. I'm trying to think of something silly to say about Darius to lighten them tone.
I will go with confused memory, like that they were referencing somebody, but we're referencing them sort of wrong.
Yeah.
You know
yeah.
what-
This is the whole interesting thing about Daniel in general. And this is really historical nerdiness that I'm sure listeners are not very interested in. Part of the reason.
Oh, they absolutely are, Elliot. Don't you for a moment think that they are not.
I'll try to make it a little less nerdy, detail oriented, and more big picture. But this goes right to the heart of why we know Daniel was written in the 2nd century
Yes.
and not the 6th century. Is all of these people that they're talking about, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, Darius, these people are 6th and 5th century. Daniel is notorious. The book of Daniel is notorious for getting names and dates and places just completely wrong.
Right.
Like, for example, later in the book, to talk about again, it's not necessarily that it isn't real people. I shouldn't have said that. The name Darius the Mede is not a real
Yes,
person.
right.
Belshazzar, right? So it talks about Belshazzar as the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar did not have a son named Belshazzar.
Right.
There is a king, and his name is, I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Who knows? Nabonidus.
Okay. If you say so.
Nabonidus, who was a real historical figure. He's attested to in historical records. He had a son named Belshazzar.
Oh, interesting.
Interestingly enough,
not
we
know
have
that.
historical records that this king was driven out into the wilderness for 10 years. Does that sound familiar? That's what happens to Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
So there's all of these really interesting ways.
Historical details that just get kind of whiffed.
Yes, they're just to anyone that knows this history intimately, which I'm not claiming
Right.
to. This is just from me reading the scholarship on it. It's completely wrong. And another example is this figure, Darius the Mede.
So that goes back to my belief that this book is meant to be more like a sermon
Yes.
to the people in the 2nd century who are going through a terrible time than it is meant to be strict history.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not a history
Right.
book. This is a sermon. And for those of us who
And
give sermons,
apocalyptic literature.
Yes.
for those of us who give sermons, every once in a while, some of our stories get a little stretched. I mean,
You
not
tell
here
them
at
out
St.
of-
David's.
Or you tell them out of order. Because the point is this, because the story that happened after makes a better point here, and the story that happened first emphasizes your point later. You know, it just...
The point is to give the people of the 2nd century BC hope.
Yep.
That's the purpose of this book, which I think it does exceedingly well. On the historical merits, he gets probably a C-.
Right.
Well, and in that regard, I think what it's comparable to is something like Esther. Esther, like you've already said, Esther is not history. It's a story.
Sermon.
It's a sermon. And in that sense, I think it's fair to say Daniel's probably very similar. Maybe there is some original historical memory or record of a Judean that was in Babylonian captivity that rose up.
Absolutely.
But again, worth saying, we do not have historical inscriptions of someone named
No.
Daniel. This idea that this person was, at one point in the book of Daniel, it talks about him being the 3rd most powerful person in the empire, right?
There's no record.
There's no record of that. And I would say, this is my personal opinion, people are welcome to disagree with me, that probably indicates that this didn't happen in some literal historical way. And that personally doesn't bother me the same way it doesn't bother me with Esther, because it's not the point of the book. That's not the point. That's not what biblical texts
It
are.
would be like, having a hard time with Jesus because he's making up parable. The point of the parable isn't that, there actually was a father who went out and brought his son in.
Right.
The point of the parable is that God loves you no matter what you've done. It's a sermon. This is a sermon.
And there may very well have been reality that the writers were drawing from.
Absolutely.
There may
Sure.
very well have
100%.
been Jewish people who were raised up in the
Absolutely.
ranks of that they were just
There
kind of
could have
drawing
been
on
a
the
long
idea and the concept
oral
of it,
tradition of a Daniel figure. Absolutely. There
Right.
could have-
who
Absolutely.
may have had whatever name.
Yep.
Yeah.
But before we go to the second part of Daniel,
Maybe.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
We're going to get there. We got to get there.
I have 35 minutes. I just want to say that we talked about the Apocrypha at the beginning of this, and I forget exactly why.
We're talking about how First Maccabees.
First
the book-
Maccabees. So there are two books of the Apocrypha that are related to Daniel and the story section of Daniel. And we've talked about the Septuagint before, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And the Septuagint version of Daniel has these two extra story bits included. And if you have a New Old Testament with an Apocrypha, you will almost certainly have them in there. The one has a wonderful name. It's called Bel and the Dragon. And the other one is named Susanna. And they are stories like the other stories of the early chapters of Daniel, which speak of sort of standing up for who you are and God providing. Bel or Baal and the dragon are these two idols that are found in the temples and in Babylon, and Daniel goes to sort of war with them and ends up showing that Israel's God is a real God and they aren't. Susanna is a young girl who someone tries to say that she's committed adultery, but she hasn't. And Daniel swoops in and saves her. And so these are extra stories that aren't in your normal book of Daniel, but were thoroughly related to the book of Daniel.
And they're short if you happen to have
Super
an
short.
Apocrypha.
Yep.
Bel and the Dragon in mine. So it comes up to 42 verses.
Yeah.
One chapter. Susanna is only 64.
Right.
Yep.
And yeah, we mentioned these before, I think. Was it when we were talking about Esther? There's the extra
There are extra bits in Esther too.
extra
Yeah.
bits of Esther, I think, is that's where we were talking about the Septuagint and these other books too.
Yep.
Also worth mentioning, as far as I understand it, at least Susanna, if not Bel and the Dragon, are both considered canonical by Catholics
Absolutely. Yeah. Catholics and Orthodox.
and Orthodox Christians.
Orthodox,
yes,
yeah.
but not by Protestant Christians and by Jews.
Right.
So interesting.
Just like everything, Episcopalians were in the middle. And so I don't know if do we read from, I don't think we have any readings ever from these two books, but there are apocryphal books that we do read from, sometimes on Sunday, sometimes on like extra little feasts.
Right.
But
And what's interesting is like even you were like from these apocryphal books in the Catholic and Orthodox tradition, they're just
right.
They're just part of Daniel. They're not even viewed as separate works.
Right.
Yeah, there's also the prayer of Azariah and the song of the three Jews.
Oh, the three young men.
Of the three young men. Yeah.
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 Which is part of morning prayer. It's one of the canticles.
That's right.
The song of the three young men. Yeah. That's where that comes from. The Apocrypha.
Yeah.
Or if you're Catholic, the Bible.
Or if you're Catholic, the Bible. Oh my goodness.
There's a lot jumping around here.
Yeah, we are.
I know.
So at the end of 6, before we make our shift into 7, I just want to point out again one of those declarations by Darius about Yahweh, God, in chapter 6, around 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples and nations of every language throughout the whole world. Now, okay, so this was Darius, not Nebuchadnezzar, so.
Yep.
May you have abundant prosperity. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people should tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, for he has saved Daniel from the power of the lions.
Yeah.
Well, seriously, there you go.
So we have Nebuchadnezzar saying this God's the real God. Here we have Darius saying those things. At the end of the book of Daniel, we're going to come to Cyrus, who is called in other places of the Old Testament a anointed one, a Messiah. You do have some exalting of other religioned folks,
Yeah.
Right.
leaders,
Right.
that God is working through them.
Until you get to the second half of Daniel.
Yeah.
And then you have this figure that is really just viewed as I think the way it's translated in my Bible is a contemptible man. And the references to Antiochus Epiphanes IV.
Not so good.
No.
Not a good guy.
Not at all.
Narcissistic personality
There's
disorder.
all these very interesting, and then this person is going to do whatever the heck they want, and then it will all crumble apart, and then someone else will rise up and be a great big jerk. It's just like, that's just one after the other.
Literally. And the shift here too, again, remember we said that the first half of Daniel we think is earlier, meaning it's, maybe around the 300s, 200s, and then late 200s, and then this second half of Daniel is a little bit later, meaning it's always confusing when you talk about BC because
I know.
Earlier,
it goes backwards. And
it goes backwards. My point is the second half of Daniel is more recent.
Right.
And
certainly written during the Seleucid.
Right. And part of the shift here is away from these kings like Darius and Nebuchadnezzar who are extolling God, or in some ways their actions are helping further God's plan. And this is the big shift to this apocalyptic. We talked about apocalyptic and eschatology and the way they often go hand in hand. The view in the second half of Daniel is really that there's going to have to be this apocalyptic showdown, this end of times showdown between God and the rulers of the empires. And it's really going to have to be that God comes onto the scene and fixes the situation.
Yeah.
What I think is really interesting, the other piece of the shift here is this is no longer Daniel interpreting someone else's dreams or visions.
His dreams.
These are his personal visions.
Right.
When I think about this section, I think of just how the people living through Antiochus Epiphanes IV's reign of terror would have felt like the world was ending. They've taken over the Temple Mount. They're sacrificing pigs on God's altar. They're setting up a statue to Zeus. They're trying to deprogram our kids from Judaism. Like, they would have felt like everything was going topsy-turvy. And
it's the end of the world.
There we go.
We know it.
Yeah. And so that's why things get apocalyptic and scary here, because we already feel like the end is near.
Right. I think that's exactly right, Rick. And part of the way we see this hope in the midst of devastation, desolation, is the idea that God will ultimately triumph, not only in this world, but in the world to come.
Yep.
And this is a theme of apocalyptic, as we talked about in our Ezekiel episode, that there is a new Jerusalem, a new heavens, a new earth. And we see at the end of the book, to jump forward to the end, in chapter 12, there shall be a time of anguish such as never has occurred since nations first came into existence. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. And the deliverance becomes not only in the present, it becomes in the future. And for those who have already died. And so of verse 2 of chapter 12, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And this is really the first time in the entire Old Testament that we have this idea, this concept of the general resurrection of the dead, which you actually talked about in our forum this weekend.
Yep.
The way this became a really prominent motif in Judaism around Jesus's day, this idea that we would all be raised up. And this is really the first time we see it in our Old Testament.
Yep.
A lot of people don't realize that. They think, Jewish people always believe this. And it's not quite. In fact, this belief was really formed in the context of the Seleucid Empire and responding to the question, where is God's justice?
How can you, if you can't get justice on this earth, then where do you get justice? If we believe that there will be justice and that God is a just God, but the actions of the present day aren't showing that, then it's going to have to come later. Because if the bad people keep winning and winning, then where's the justice? Well, the justice is going to come at the end, when the dead will be raised and the living and the dead will stand together and they will be judged, and God's people go to this side and everyone else goes to the other side, and boom, that's it.
Yep, exactly. And I think it's worth saying that from the period of Daniel around 200 BCE up until the time of Jesus, up to around 100 CE, there is a lot of debate, conversation, and differing views about how this would work.
Yep.
So I think that's really worth mentioning. There wasn't some universal understanding of the way the general resurrection was going to look or work.
Right. And we even see in Jesus's day, there were sects of Judaism that did not believe in the resurrection.
Yep. So
The Sadducees did not believe in
and the Sadducees.
The Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. The Pharisees did.
And so there's mention of a book. Is this kind of similar to the 144 isn't that in Revelation, the 144?
Yeah, the idea behind it, I think, is the same, that the who's on God's side is already been determined. Like we
the
know,
book of life or
we
something?
know who it is, right? And so it's either the 144,000, that's like a perfect number. It's not meant to be literal. Like only 144,000 people are going to heaven.
Don't tell that to the people who come and knock on my door.
Those people believe that only 144,000, which makes me wonder why they go knock people's doors.
Because I wouldn't be telling anyone.
Yeah, because I don't want to be kicked out. But it's meant to be this like all-encompassing number. But the idea of the book, the idea of the number is that it has been preordained, like that God is victorious and that we, God's people, are going to be on God's side.
And you can understand pastorally why this would be a source of comfort and hope for people. As Rick mentioned, I think when we kind of abstract it theologically, it's not a very pastorally comforting idea, right? This idea that like, oh, it's already been determined. I think anyone listening to what we were just talking about would be like, well, where's the space for human freedom? Where's the choice? Where's the decision? Where's, don't we have a responsibility to love God?
And if it's already been decided, then what's it matter what I do right now? Good, bad, or otherwise.
And this is just not the questions that Daniel's trying to wrestle with when he says, for example, that was chapter 12, verse 1, I think, right? There will be a time of anguish. So again, notice the pastoral context. But at that time, your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. And I think in that context, it is meant to be this source of hope, that it's this idea that nothing can take you out of this.
As wild as the times seem right now, God is in control, and in the end, all will be well. That's the meaning behind it.
Exactly. So I think we go astray when we separate that context from the idea of, like you said, people knocking on your door, being like, there's this many spaces.
So we've talked a couple times about like ideas evolving. We've talked about gods and angels. We've talked about the idea of like how monotheism works and the idea of how ultimate justice and afterlife evolves. Like sometimes we think, oh, it's always been like the good people, they die, they go to heaven. The bad people, they die, they go somewhere else. Like, and that is, it's a very simple, lovely, it fits on a bumper sticker. That is not the biblical picture.
No.
And that is absolutely not how it develops. And it develops, just as you said, Elliot, pastorally.
Yeah.
These questions, like, how can justice be done? And then the biblical authors sit down, like, this is how it's done. Later, and I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but I just think this is really important.
Agreed.
1 Thessalonians, Paul is dealing with people waiting for Jesus to come back.
Yep.
And we're all getting out of here, and he's going to bring us to heaven. And the people of Thessalonica, the Christians in Thessalonica, are worried about the people who have died. And did they miss Jesus? And so Paul has to send this first letter. The whole reason he sends the letter is to say, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. They're gonna meet us there. In fact, they're gonna go first.
Right.
It's a pastoral response.
Right.
How do we talk about this ultimate victory, ultimate life, God loving us with the realities of the world around us?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I think it does need to be said. And I think it really is a radical claim that so many modern people struggle with. When modern people think of truth, we're influenced, and we've said this before on the podcast, by very Greek philosophical ideas, that truth is timeless and universal. This just is not the way the Bible thinks about truth and the word of the Lord. Truth in the prophetic tradition is tied to the revelation, the word of the Lord. And what we see is that is received into a context. It addresses that context. And as that context shifts and changes, it grows, it moves, we could use the word evolves. And I think this is a really good example of that. There's this constant tension with what has been received and what we are dealing with, and how do we make those two meet? And it often requires rethinking, reformulating in community. We've talked a lot on this podcast about, and this, we see this happen in our own scriptures. This happens in Acts with Peter. Peter and the blanket of food that comes down.
He walks into that encounter believing you had to eat kosher. He walks out, he's like, I can eat anything I want.
Exactly.
Because something else had been revealed.
Yes, this is exactly what happens in the New Testament with circumcision. I know we're really on a rabbit hole
We are
here.
cooking, though.
But it's
I'm
so
busy
important.
designing a T-shirt of 3 of us in rabbit holes.
It is so important. I mean, when this debate happens in the early church, like, you can find scripture passages that are like, this is an everlasting
covenant.
Ordinance.
Everyone among you will be cut off if you do not do this.
And imagine the fear. They're like, oh, they
got to do this. You got to do this. And then Acts 15, they're like, forget about it.
Yeah, like a God has spoken a new word. So that's just important to say. I think, it's a great reminder for this stuff on resurrection. Like, you might read this and say, it says everlasting life for some and everlasting contempt for others. And I'm not saying that's not true. Some people believe that, but it is important to say there is a significant debate around that in our own scriptures. And we'll come to more of that later.
Right.
And there are people who do believe in those things still being everlasting covenants.
That's true too.
Sure.
There are a lot of people who maintain.
I believe in everlasting covenants. Like, I believe that God makes everlasting covenants with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though some of us believe that some of those covenants have shifted, there are our neighbors, our friends who believe in those other ones.
And God is constantly revealing to us over and over again what those covenants look like and are, and how they're meant to be understood in this time, which is different how they were understood 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about the fantastic beasts, the Pokemon, the whatever these?
I mean, it's classic apocalyptic literature. You always have scary beasts.
They always represent geopolitical forces.
That's exactly right.
Kings, empires.
Yeah.
Never met a horn with an eye on it before.
Yeah. I think I will say, this portion of Daniel is astronomically confusing if you're not reading a commentary or a study Bible.
Yeah.
You're kind of just, what the heck does any of this mean and what's the point of this? I don't know if you want to say something about that, Rick.
Yeah, let's help a listener out.
Where should we start?
Where do you begin?
So these are these fantastical beasts. How does somebody show up to the scripture without a commentary and get anything out of this?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not a fan of Bibles with lots of extra writing in them. You'll notice I have no notes in my Bible, other than my own notes that I've written in. Like, I don't come with lots of annotations. Elliot and Natalee are right. This is a book you want a book with lots of notes in it.
Right.
Because everything is representing something else. And so this beast with this horn is representing this figure from this nation. And these 10 horns represents this, and the one eye on top of the horns represents something else. Like, it is very poetic. It is very metaphorical. It is very.
And
I do want to say, because there's a lot going on, it is one of the classic books, like the Book of Revelation, that can be twisted to mean something completely differently.
Yes.
So there's this whole movement that really begins in the middle to late 1800s, millenarianism, and that tries to look at particularly Daniel, Revelation, maybe a little bit of Ezekiel, and nail down exactly how the world's going to end, and then exactly when the world's going to end. There have been. Isn't there a date coming up in the next week or two when the world's supposed to end? There was
I thought we got past that in 2012.
No, there's a new date.
There's always new projections.
And if you ever go down a real rabbit hole, and honestly, I really don't recommend it, and hear the reasoning behind why we think it's going to be May 12th, 2010 or whatever it is, they're going to have quotes from Daniel and quotes from Revelation, and this horn means this, and this number of things means this number of years, and that's why it means September 27th at 10 a.m. And it's all hogwash.
Yes. It's hogwash because the purpose of these metaphors and symbols are not about the future.
Yeah.
They are about the present.
Yep.
The purpose of this writing, both Revelation and the second half of Daniel, are a form of resistance literature within exile.
Yep.
If you are in exile under a foreign power, you cannot write something and circulate it that says,
The Antiochus Epiphanes IV is a jerk.
Yes.
You can't say that.
No, you're not allowed to
It's
say that.
It's off with your head.
It is off with your head.
So you end up talking about beasts with horns and eyes.
Exactly.
Right?
And there is within the culture
Or the number of the beast being 616 or 666
Right.
or whatever.
Yes.
Maybe.
There is symbology that would it's subversive. This is symbology that would have been understood by the people listening to it and reading it to correspond to a present day reality.
And to bring hope to those people.
Yes. And I'll even point this out in our text because Daniel and Revelation, which is a form of apocalyptic literature, don't often say this represents this.
No.
That's what makes it so hard.
Right.
Just to substantiate our claims here that this is addressing present day realities, you do get hints of that. And one place you get that is Daniel 8, around verse 18 and onwards. So when this happens, I love this section because Daniel himself recognizes the difficulty of this symbolism and imagery. He's like, what does any of this mean?
Yeah, this is Daniel talking to Gabriel.
That's right. And Gabriel has to explain some of this. And it says in verse 20, as for the ram that you saw with 2 horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia.
Yeah.
The male goat is the king of Greece, Alexander the Great. And the great horn between its eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. And to me, that is a critical section of Daniel in understanding anyone that is like, oh, well, the goat and the ram is Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And
Right.
It's just ridiculous.
No.
That's not what's going on here. And it's really a mistaken kind of theological modern movement that says, oh, these are present day politics.
And I just want to say all of those particular ways to read the Bible are all modern. They are completely foreign to the long 2,000-year history and tradition of the church.
Yes.
Our forebears, the great fathers and mothers of the church, did not read Daniel nor Revelation like that
Absolutely.
at all. Hogwash.
That's a great reminder. I don't think many of our cross connectors or St. David's folks do.
No
way.
No.
But they may know people that do. So we're just,
Absolutely.
giving them
you
some
heard of it
helpful-
somewhere.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we've pretty much covered most of Daniel. I think we have left a glaring hole
Oh, no.
of something really, maybe as Christians, the most important section of Daniel we have not discussed.
How did we miss it? We went too far down some sort of rabbit hole.
Yeah, too many rabbit holes. We didn't talk at all about Daniel 7 and the Son of Man. So we can do
we
it.
started to get into 7 and we ended
I
up
know,
in 12.
I know. I was like, we got to talk about the general resurrection in 12.
I got us started into 7 and then we were in 12.
So hit us with the Son of Man.
We've talked about this before on the podcast. If you go way back to some of our gospel episodes, we talked about how in the gospels, there are terms for Jesus used, such as Son of Man and Son of God. And speaking of modern interpretation, it's very much only modern folks that are like, oh, Son of Man means he was human, and Son of God means he was
God.
He was God. He was
No.
divine. No. These are titles from the Old Testament. In many ways, they're messianic titles. And the title Son of Man comes from Daniel 7 specifically. And you'll see in Daniel 7, verse 13, Daniel receives this vision and he says, as I watched in the night visions, I saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. And this Son of Man is at the right hand of Yahweh. And the Son of Man is going to do things and have things given to them. So they're going to be given dominion and glory and, keyword, kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. So the point with this Son of Man figure is, again, this is kind of the shift that apocalyptic makes, is apocalyptic literature in many facets begins to see that the solutions to our problems are not going to come from the human plane.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where the hope for a messianic figure arises. And so this is why Jesus is called the Son of Man. He's viewed as this messianic king.
Figure.
Yeah, this messianic figure. There's a whole rabbit trail we could go down that nobody expected this messianic figure to be God. You talked about this actually in our forum on Sunday, Rick. We won't go down that one, but it is important to recognize this is where the title for Jesus as a Messiah is coming from. And it's important to also remember messianic titles are always related to what the person is going to do. It's not just a title or a name. It is a title that is rooted in actions.
Yep.
And so what the Son of Man does is works on behalf of, in this section, someone called the Ancient of Days, the Ancient One, Yahweh, and restores justice, harmony, peace. That's what the New Testament writers are claiming Jesus is doing when they call him the Son of Man. That's that.
Can I say one last thing about Daniel?
Yeah.
Or for my last thing? You might have the last thing too, Natalie. We talk about the great abomination, the desolating sacrilege. This is the end of chapter 9. And this is one of the reasons why we think that this book is absolutely written in the 2nd century, because we think that's absolutely a reference to the statue of Zeus that is set up in God's temple. It's the desolating sacrilege. Interesting, Jesus, both in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, references not only this passage, but the great statue that stood, that was eventually torn down.
Ooh. Well, I don't have a final thought on Daniel.
Do you have a song for us?
I wish I could think. I'm sure there's one somewhere in my brain about like Daniel and the lion's den, and it is just not coming to me. There's a VBS song I've forgotten. Just to remind folks that if you have young ones, 2nd through 5th grade, please bring them out. We will not be going through probably too many of the strange
beasts.
Wild beasts part of Daniel with the kids, but we will be giving them a message of hope and of God's enduring love for God's people.
That sounds like a good message for all of us.
Which is a message right from here, from the book of Daniel, and for one and all. Please don't forget, folks, to join us at St. David's Fair. We will be there periodically throughout the day, and we will have stickers at St. David's table. We're also doing pet blessings at the St. David's table at the St. David's Fair. Great fun for all. Saturday, October the 4th from 10 to 4, rain or shine. Come on out. And also don't forget to share this podcast and the Cross Connections videos on YouTube to your friends. Tag us. Make sure that the post is public, by the way. I know not everyone has their posts automatically set to public. In this case, you're going to want to set this post to public so that we can see it. And tag us and share, and we'll put you in the drawing for tote bags.
Which you are sporting today, by the way.
I
Carrying
did.
Bibles, commentaries. It's a great bag.
It's a fantastic bag. I've decided it is now my Bible commentary bag, and my water bottle too, because always going to have to. You need to keep yourself refreshed with the waters,
I got
the
my
living
Cross
waters.
Connections mug.
Yeah, Cross Connections mug. We'll see.
Here in Studio 1715.
Yep, right here in Studio 7. Oh man, I should have said that right at the beginning. Welcome back, one and all, Cross Connectors, to Studio 1715. and the Cross Connections podcast. All right, that's all we got for you this week, folks. Next week, Hosea and his real strange family.
Oh man, gird your loins.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cross Connections Cover to Cover. New episodes drop each Wednesday. Please be sure to follow or like us on your favorite podcasting app to find us easily each week, or join us on our email list at stdavidschurch.org/crossconnections. If you have questions for us, you can call us at 484-588-5656 and leave a voicemail with your name, where you're from, and your question or comment. Please note, we may use your recorded voice in an upcoming episode of Cross Connections. If you like what you hear, we'd love if you would share this with your friends and rate us in Spotify and Apple Podcasts or whatever other app you're using so people can find us as well. Don't forget to visit our show notes for the year's reading list and any other resource links we've mentioned. Cross Connections is a ministry of St. David's Episcopal Church in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Season 2 Cover to Cover is hosted by
Rick Morley, Elliot VanHoy,
and Natalee Hill. Logo graphic design and podcast production by Natalee Hill. Stock media music provided by Marscott and Mood Mode Pond 5. You're welcome to learn more about all of St. David's worship and ministries at stdavidschurch.org. At some point, we started talking about angels, and I'd sent you all this silly comic about if they're not biblically accurate.
Yes.
So I say to Nerida, your angels aren't biblically accurate. And she's like, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm realizing, not everybody really knows. I'm like, well, there's the angels, and they're described with multiple 6 wings and all these eyes, and they're kind of nutty and not what anybody would expect. And she says to me, so where did we get this idea? How did we turn them into just a person, like an attractive person with wings? I'm like, I am not actually sure.
Probably Hallmark, honestly.
Well, right. And so I'm reading Daniel, and I'm like, well, there's this like a man or someone who appears as a man shows up. I'm like, maybe they get it from Daniel? Like, is
Well,
this
yeah,
where
this is the
comes
first
from?
time angels have a name. You have Michael and Gabriel.
Right. And Gabriel comes back, like we hear of.
There's the biblically accurate Christmas tree topper.
That's amazing.
I
We
know.
should send that to Nerida. Can we get some of these
Can we
in
get
the
some of
gift shop?
these?
Can you order us one for the top
Cross
of the
connections
tree
merch.
in the hall, and then for the one at your display, and then just one for us?
Oh, for the tree in Studio 1715.
Special order, biblically accurate, provided by
amazing.
Cross Connections.
That is amazing.
I want one now.
Yeah, I think it would be funny to have it in the gift shop as the Cross Connections
Yeah.
special.